Second day of the meeting of NATO foreign ministers, the issue of Ukraine was discussed in Brussels. Just 2 weeks ago, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke here. He spoke remotely via video link. And then he asked NATO, if not to close the sky, at least to provide.
You can give us 1% of all your planes, 1% of all your tanks, 1%. We just cannot buy that. These supplies are directly dependent only on NATO decisions, political decisions, by the way.
The Ukrainian foreign minister is the chief guest at NATO. He has a meeting with representatives of the G7 countries and bilateral meetings with diplomats from Turkey, Norway, Australia, South Korea, Canada and the United States. He has very little time, so he goes straight to the main purpose of his visit.
My agenda is very simple. It has only 3 items on it. It's weapons, weapons and weapons. The more weapons we get and the sooner they arrive in Ukraine, the more human lives will be saved, the more cities and villages will not be destructed, and there will be no more butchers. As weird as it may sound, but today weapons serve the purpose of peace.
The minister of the defending country specified that it is about airplanes, armored vehicles, anti-ship missiles, powerful air defense systems. It is also necessary to increase economic pressure on Russia.
We will continue to insist on full oil and gas embargo for Russia, on de-swifting all Russian banks, on making sure that all ports are closed for Russian vessels and Russian goods with the minimal number of exemptions from it based on humanitarian grounds.
And it seems that the appeal of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his minister has finally been heard. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that alliance countries will supply Ukraine not only with light weapons, but also with heavy weapons, including the latest ones.
Ukraine is fighting in a defensive war, so this distinction between offensive and defensive weapons doesn't actually have any real meaning in a defensive war.
Stoltenberg is pleased that NATO weapons have shown their effectiveness in Ukraine.
We can see all the Russian armor that has been destroyed. We have seen Russian planes being shot down. And of course this is first and foremost because of the bravery, the commitment and the courage of the Ukrainian armed forces. But the equipment that has been supplied is of course also of vital importance.
Ukraine's rearmament seems to be the main topic of the meeting, and all speakers are talking about it, and they are not very talkative, which suggests that a decision in principle has already been made. Supplies will be significantly increased.
And the important thing is to continue putting pressure on Russia and continue supporting Ukraine. Zelensky had a lot of support, but what he really needs is more arms. Less applause and more arms. Good words, good, but the important thing is practical issues. More resources, more military capabilities to resist the Russian aggression.
According to Borrell, he believes that sooner or later the European Union will agree on the oil embargo against Russia, but it is better to do it as soon as possible. These issues will probably be discussed in Kiev, where he is scheduled to visit with European Commission head Ursula von der Leyen. Despite the secrecy, some delegates revealed exactly what weapons they would be supplying. Australia responded to the request voiced by President Zelensky during his address to its parliament.
We're in the process of preparing the Bushmasters that President Zelensky requested in his address to our parliament, his momentous address to our parliament last week. They will be transported as soon as possible. We're coordinating on humanitarian response, part of our deliveries here into Europe for Ukraine.
Australia has already sent a number of flights of cargoes to Ukraine, its own and those of New Zealand. According to Dmytro Kuleba at the final press conference, NATO has heard his request, but it is very important to fulfill it promptly, before the Russian troops dislodged from the north of Ukraine regrouping for the next attacks in east and south of the country.
The battle for Donbass will remind you was Second World War, with large operations, maneuvers, involvement of thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, planes, artillery. Weapons are like money, they love silence. and I will not be in a position to go into details. But let me put it this way: I have no doubts that Ukraine will have weapons necessary to fight. The question is the timeline.
And the general results of the meeting were summarized by the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken.
The participation of all of these allies and partners highlights the remarkably broad coalition of countries from around the world that are united in standing with Ukraine and against the Russian government's aggression. Countries that recognize Moscow isn't just attacking one country, but the entire international rules-based order. Sickening images and accounts coming out of Bucha and other parts of Ukraine have only strengthened our collective resolve and unity.
The outcome of the meeting suggests that Ukraine has already become a central security element in the new world architecture, and its central role at the historic NATO meeting confirms this. While Russia's army is being pushed out of Kiev and regrouping, NATO countries have a good opportunity to help Ukraine withstand a possible new attack. We will soon find out how quickly this can be done. Vitaly Sizov from Brussels, UATV.